Good morning. I replace Matteo Bordone, and I'm very glad to introduce Chilly Gonzales. And
I'm very happy because Richarda is a pianist. And so a pianist is always better than a journalist for me.
So Chilly Gonzales comes from Canada, but he soon moved to Europe, to Paris, Berlin, London, etc., to make pop, rap, rock music, electronic music.
Not rock, I don't think.
Not rock, okay, sorry. First, well, together with musicians such as Daft Punk, Jarvis Cocker, and other great musicians. Many of you probably know Let's Groove Again, Never Stop. That was a very important jingle for the iPad, etc. But all this didn't actually start with the piano, but with percussions. Is that right?
Yes. I want to quickly add, I played with Daft Punk and Jarvis Cocker, but I also have a very close family of musicians from Canada, such as Peaches and Feist and my friend Mocky and people like that. And sometimes I will end up collaborating with a very famous person like Drake or Daft Punk. But that's like spending 1 or 2 days in the studio. And it's very great because they're so famous and people discover me because they say, oh, Daft Punk likes this guy, Chilly Gonzales, let me check him out. So it's very nice for me. But more important for me is my close musical family. So now to answer your question, yes.
So
I began on the drums.
Because rhythm, I think rhythm is very important in your music.
Yes, but also rhythm is the part of music. You can already spend your whole life learning how to have rhythm. And so I always think of kids and how they learn music. I think I was lucky to learn drums first because later, when I moved on to the piano, I already had the sense of rhythm. And it meant that my brain could concentrate on harmony and melody because I already had the base of rhythm. And if a kid starts with the violin, for example, the violin is very difficult to just make a sound. So a kid has to spend a few years just trying to hit one note that doesn't sound like a dying cat. And I feel very bad for these kids because there's so much in their brain trying to just make the sound that they forget about rhythm. And so I think there's an order to things. And I think rhythm must come first. Rhythm must be how we first made music, you know? It would have just been stuff like that. And hitting rocks. And it's the most basic way to make musical expression with rhythm, I would say. But I didn't choose it. It's because my brother, who's an older brother, was already a really good pianist. And so I kind of wasn't allowed to go to the piano because it was his territory. So I just played along with him. I looked up to him so much. And I would just sit there actually playing a pillow with knitting needles. You know, just like... the most basic things while my brother was playing the piano. And I was amazed that there was this thing called music that you could do with another person, and you make something together. I thought it was fascinating, and only later did I get interested in melody and harmony and things like that.
So we said pop music, not rock, but electronic music, and the piano. So is there a way to bring these music on the piano, so to translate pop, rap on this incredible instrument?
Yes, definitely. I believe in the translatability of musical styles, 100%. So when we think of a musical style, we think of it as something, we think of it like almost like different countries, maybe. And you think, wow, you know, Germany, where I live, and Italy, they have a border. It's so close, right? It's only, I don't know how many 100 kilometers. And yet, when I come to Italy, I'm like, wow, it's like a different planet here. It's so different culturally. But is it? I think I'm just looking at it from a very, very limited perspective. But if I step back, Italians are humans, and Germans are humans. And there's actually 99.9% similarities between Italians and Germans. And then there's this little 1% that's like the language, maybe how people dress. Italians talk with their hands and Germans just sort of sit there like robots. Whatever cliches you want, they're very small differences. It's a little bit like with humans and chimpanzees. You know, they say 98% of the DNA of the human and chimpanzee is the same. And we would like to think that's not true. We're not animals. We're enlightened and all this other stuff. We would think we're so different from the chimpanzees. But in fact, we are chimpanzees with just a small difference. And I think this applies to music. So Baroque music and rap music might seem like different countries, but they are music. And in the Western world especially, it's the 12 notes of the piano that are the way in to this kind of music. So I believe in a kind of musical humanism, where you believe that you don't look for the differences between musical styles or musical time periods. You look for what's similar. You look for that 98% that's the same between Baroque and rap. The 2% is just, I think we have a future drummer here in the back. I don't think she has a future as a singer, but maybe as a drummer. So I think to be a musical humanist is to look for what's similar between styles. And we sometimes get caught up in saying, but rap is so different. Rap is different socially. It comes from a different social place. It has a social meaning that's different from other kinds of music. But the musical elements aren't so different in rap. There's also a technological difference. So you have sampling. You have machines that can take a... Should I go over to the piano for a second?
Please.
Yeah,
Yes,
can we get some light over on the piano? I think there's a piano there. I can't see. It's too dark. Oh, there we go.
Thank you. Thank you.
We do have a piano. What's going on here? So I don't know if you know how sampling works when you make rap music, but basically, if I'm a rap producer, I put on like a disco album, and then some disco comes out, you know? And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I like that part that goes da da da. I take the record, I go a little bit back, and I go, okay, cool. And then I take my sampler, which just takes just this piece of music, and it's just, now there's a button I can push. And every time I hit the button, it goes. And so I can then make a new piece of music just by hitting this button in different ways. And so the idea is you grab something and you turn it into another piece of music. Now, some people would say, this is new. This is radical. This is why rap is a truly new style of music. And I would say, yes, maybe the technology makes this possible, but there's also something called a theme and variations, which is when a composer would take a theme from another composer. For example, Mozart might take a piece from Antonio Salieri and make something much better out of it. And then Salieri is very embarrassed. You remember the scene in Amadeus, maybe, where he's like, I took your theme, Antonio, and then he like does the most amazing shit. And then Antonio Salieri is just like watching his piece of music become something so much better. But the theme and variations is essentially the sampling of the 18th century. And the idea, if you take a theme and variations, it means you take something as simple as, there's actually a Mozart variations, I think, on the Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, we call it in English. You have that piece in Italy?
Yes.
What's it called?
It's called Mama. No, we don't. I don't think we use the Italian name. It's the French one.
Okay. So you have this kind of nursery rhyme. And the beautiful thing about that is then you can just play it in the bass. So this is also like what a rapper would do. You take this disco sample I had, and you pitch it lower, and you get. You can also play it faster. And the original still. And so with Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, you can do the same. You can go. So you might say rap invented sampling, but I would argue it was already there in a different technology. The technology was the harpsichord or the piano, and with rap music, the technology is, something digital, but it's doing the same musical concept of remixing, essentially. So that's how I'm able to sort of look for the connections between different styles of music and say, okay, maybe the social meaning changes, maybe the technology changes, but the musical material so far didn't change. And that's what I think the translatability of styles is. So that's how I approach music. So if I play a classical piece, I think like the rap producer, looking for that disco loop. If I'm playing a Chopin waltz or something, just take that bit, make a little rap beat out of it. And part of trying to play other styles of music on the piano means to try to change how you actually approach the instrument. So you must know this because you're a trained pianist. There's a school of piano playing that was very popular in the 19th century. It's basically a romantic approach to piano playing. And it involves a lot of expression. And the way that they create expression is by changing the tempo all the time. So you never really have a clear tempo. So let me take a rap song and play it in a romantic interpretation. And then you'll hear how it doesn't really sound like rap anymore. In a way, I'm taking away the rap approach from a rap song. So you must know the song by Dr. Dre, Still Dre, right? Do you know that one? Okay. So if I was a romantic pianist and I just have the score of the Dr. Dre song, Still Dre, I might play it like this. So see, that time is just sometimes fast, sometimes getting a little bit faster, and then all of a sudden a little bit slower. And also maybe sometimes the chords are together and sometimes broken. Diddle, diddle, and sometimes doesn't really sound like rap anymore. I couldn't really rap on that because the time is constantly shifting. So if I was trying to rap on that, I wouldn't know how to follow it, But if I want to play it like it would be played like a rap, I have to turn myself into the new technology of rap, which is to say a digital metronome, which is something a human can never really accomplish, to be like a robot, but you can get close, and maybe there's a bit of poetry in trying. And that means that I am trying to hit every note of this chord. Every time I hit this chord, I'm trying to hit it the exact same way. Remember when I told you that there's a disco, there's a few bars of disco in that button, and you hit that button. So instead of hitting the chord, I think like I'm hitting a button the same way every time. And that means I'm trying to hit the same volume every time. and the same amount of broken verses together. And I think of that one, the first chord I hit becomes the button, and I just try to hit the button over and over again. And I think that's how you can translate rap to the piano without the technology, just with the musical idea of hitting everything like it's a button. It can also go in reverse, I would say. And this is one way to create humor in music, which is to take something that people maybe don't think has a lot of musical value and to give it some value by dressing it up like it's in the world of classical music. So let's pick a very common sort of stupid song that we all, Eye of the Tiger, right? If I play the chorus of Eye of the Tiger as if it's a Baroque piece, see a little bit of laughing here. It's like suddenly something you thought was only living over here is suddenly living over here. And this is a way to, even with humor, to create my vision of musical humanism and the idea that maybe you should think about why you're laughing. Maybe because you decided Eye of the Tiger is this kind of piece of music and Baroque music is this kind of music, but they're actually quite similar. All I have to do is go over to the piano and play those notes and use the musical concepts of Baroque music and apply them to Eye of the Tiger. And right away you have a musical humanist moment that is also quite humorous. I'm going to come back. Is that okay?
As you prefer.
I'll be back here, don't worry.
Because you are working on new school piano techniques, let's say, so influenced maybe by, is it?
Maybe I would say music techniques, using the piano. But I'm not interested in pianism, to be totally honest. I'm interested in music and how music works, and how you can tell a story with music, things like this. My best teachers growing up were not pianists. My best teachers were other instrumentalists. I had quite a few jazz musician teachers who taught me how music works, and they just would make me play with them. And I had to learn by doing it. I had to learn by hearing it and doing it. I had a jazz guitarist teacher, I had a jazz drummer teacher, and they just tried to explain to me musical structure, musical theory, ways to approach music, rather than how do you hold your hand at the piano. So I consider myself someone who wants to share music. I don't exactly want to share exactly the piano. I think you can make music with just your mouth if you want to be a rapper. You can make music with your computer if you want to be an electronic producer. You can also be a pianist. I don't think it's important what instrument you play, as long as you're a student of how music works. So my book is for pianists, but it's about music. This is the Reintroduction Etudes.
This is for those who studied piano maybe at some time and then maybe...
they gave it up.
Gave up.
Yeah.
Probably because of difficulties in taking lessons, maybe, and difficulties in old school music techniques, maybe. Yeah, probably.
Yeah, or bad teachers is often the case.
Often.
Teachers who don't really inspire, who just put their students through a kind of machine, a formula, and never really ask the student, hey, what do you want to do? The first thing I would do if I was giving a one-on-one piano lesson with someone is, why do you want to do this? Do you even want to be here? Do you want to play music? Are you interested? I think many kids who go to take their first piano lesson don't know why they're there. Maybe their parents pushed them into it, and then maybe the teacher is not a sensitive enough teacher to ask them what they want. So it's normal that after 2 years they get interested in something else. They get interested in sports, or comic books, or drinking, I don't know.
And these etudes are dedicated to special people, for your friends, well, musicians that work with you, but also Maria Callas, also Clara Schumann. And so is there a direct, yes, well, one is for Steve Jobs. one.
Yes, there's many people have inspired me. Most of them are musicians, but of course there are other people there. Barack Obama is there.
Barack Obama.
He's left-handed, and the piece I wrote is about what to do with your left hand. So I thought about former president. It hurts to say that, doesn't it? Former President Obama. And Steve Jobs, who was sort of a kind of futuristic thinker, thinking ahead of everybody, so it's very inspiring. I like dedications. In the old days of classical music, pieces were often dedicated to all kinds of people. Sometimes it was dedicated to a king or a queen because they were giving some financial support to the composer. Sometimes it was just because he was giving lessons to a woman, maybe, and there was some romantic feelings, but he wasn't allowed to act on it, so he dedicated the piece. The dedication is a very special part of classical music. In my case, it's paying back the inspiration that I feel from people like, whether it's John McEnroe, the tennis player, or just my good friend Feist. That's what those dedications are for.
And about the Romantic era, because we talked about Romanticism, I know that you have some favorite composers. So
also some not so favorite composers.
So, can we know maybe one and one or two and two?
Yes, well, my favorite musical figure, not my favorite composer, but my favorite musician of the Romantic era is Franz Liszt. And yesterday, Ricciarda brought me to the Scala Museum, and there is a Steinway that belonged to Franz Liszt that he ended up giving to his niece, von Bülow, and it ended up here in Milan. And Ricciarda arranged it so that I could play on this piano yesterday. So I touched something that Franz Liszt touched. And there was the piano bench, and so I thought, now my ass has touched something that Franz Liszt's ass was touching. I touched asses with Franz Liszt, guys. And the best part is, I gave her my phone to take some video. I said, okay, great, I'll have a little video. I can share it on Facebook maybe of me playing on Franz Liszt's piano. And then I got home, and the sound didn't work.
It wasn't my fault.
we don't know why, but maybe it was the ghost of Franz Liszt telling me, come on, man, don't bring me on social media. Just have a moment. Have a moment with me. Come on, Gonzo. I think that was a smart message from Franz Liszt. And he was the kind of, it's a cliche to say it now, but it really is true. He was the first rock star in a way. He really understood the power of personality together with music. And until him, maybe just before him, there was Paganini who understood it also. But before those two guys, people didn't really think personality was an important part of music. And so when you went to a concert in like the late 1700s or early 1800s, it would be a mix of all kinds of stuff. They thought it has to be a lot of variation. There has to be, singing, and then also this and that, and it was a bit random in a way. And Franz Liszt invented the piano recital, the idea that one person can get up on a stage and play for 2 whole hours. He was also the first to move the piano to this kind of position where he could look at people, because he understood music is powerful, but music with a story behind it is even more powerful. And that is something that every musician today, no matter what style they work in, has to understand that. And we're still in this kind of culture. It's a much more extreme version of what Franz Liszt started. Our celebrity culture is, of course, gone much farther than probably anyone could have imagined, but it began around this time of the Romantic era with people like Paganini and then perfected by Franz Liszt.
And what about Brahms?
Well, Brahms, can we talk about Wagner for a moment?
Okay.
Fuck Wagner.
Do you like opera?
I'm not a big opera fan, and the reason is opera was necessary at the time to sound like it sounds, because If you go to a place like Scala and you see all the boxes and how far your voice has to go, this is why they developed this style of singing that they call lyric opera singing. And this worked. But then someone invented this thing, the microphone. And there's people like Frank Sinatra who realized, oh, okay, now this thing is like a very special instrument. I can create intimacy with the microphone. And that's why we love listening to Frank Sinatra. But the opera singers just kept on singing super loud. It's like they ignored the new invention of the microphone. And they still think it's the moment where they have to sing all the way to the back of the house. And that's why most of us, when we go see an opera now, we're like, why are they singing like that? So I can't stand to sit through an opera personally. I also had oh geez, no, you don't have to clap for that. That's just my personal taste. You don't have to agree. But I also grew up with a very, very loud mother. And I'm not kidding about this. This made me not like any kind of loud singing. So there's a lot of music that people like, and they'll ask me, do you like Beyonce? And I say, look, I think Beyonce is very talented, but I can't listen to it because she sings too loud most of the time. So many musicians, if they sing loud, it's just going to trigger something in me, and I don't like it. So I don't like opera for the same reason I don't like Beyonce.
So shall we finish with another piece? Would you like to play something?
Sure. What would you guys like to hear? Gogol. Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, this is an important piece because this was the first piece that I wrote for solo piano number 1, and it's the first song on solo piano number 1. And so it was kind of the first time I wrote something on the piano, and I thought, this is good just like this. I don't need to rap on it. I don't need to add synthesizers. I don't need to turn this into anything. It's good just like it is. So this is Gogol. And thank you to Ricciardia, by the way, who did an amazing job. And you have a kind of radio show or podcast type thing going on. Do you want to tell people about it? Because they can hear you. Because you were such a good journalist today, maybe they want to check out your radio show.
No. Well, when you will come, yes.
Okay, but where can people hear it?
No, well, it's a radio show on contemporary composers, and so in a few months' time, Gonzo will be back in Milan, and so we will have a program with him, and that will be Note d'autore.
What station is it on?
Radio Classica. No, thank you.
Let me give a very short introduction about Gogol, because one thing we didn't really talk about is that the piano is kind of a weak instrument, expressively speaking. So the human voice, for example, if you hear Nina Simone or Feist, singers like that, hit a single note. Just one note can be so beautiful. On a piano, it's very difficult for one note to really be beautiful, because once you hit the note, it just kind of dies. You know, other instruments you can add vibrato, or you can bend the note, right? Like on a violin, you can go and create this like drama. With the piano, you can't do that. You have to. There's just nowhere in between, and so it's so expressively weak, actually, and yet composers keep coming back to it and trying to think of tricks to kind of fake expression. And so I'm obsessed with this idea that the piano can't really bend notes. You know, in jazz music, you have the blue note. That's the note that's just in between, right? It'd be something like, okay, that was really ugly, but it's like somewhere in between these two notes. And so it's tragic that on the piano, you can't really play in between the notes. And yet, the composers keep on coming back to these neighbor notes. You know, that's why this... I mean, to me, it's almost like Beethoven is kind of teasing, the tragedy that we can't play in between these notes, you know? And then some jazz musicians like Thelonious Monk, they kind of decided to just sort of play both notes at the same time as maybe the closest way to create a note that's in between. So he would do something like this. So this piece, Gogol, is very much based on this semitone idea, the semitone being the closest that two notes can be together on the piano. So you're going to hear a lot of semitones on this piece as well, as a kind of celebration of the weakness of the piano. So, Gogol. Thank you. And thank you to Ricciardia and to Piano City Milan, Titi Santini for organizing this. And thank you all for coming, listening. And to Gianluca and Maurizio. Goodbye.